All right, let's take a trip back in time. Just imagine you're walking down this bustling street, right? Sun beating down,
Yeah.
and all around you are these vibrant walls just towering over you. They're made of glazed brick.
Wow.
And the air, you can practically taste it. It's thick with all these exotic spices. And you hear all these languages, people from Greece, Ionia, even further, traders haggling. But this isn't Rome, it isn't Constantinople, this is Babylon.
At its peak. Babylon.
Yeah, Babylon, under King Nebuchadnezzar II. And today we're going to take a deep dive into this incredible ancient city, once the center of a vast empire. And to help us do that, we have the perfect person, Professor Paul Alon Beaulier.
Hello.
Now, Professor, you're a leading expert on ancient Babylon.
That's right.
So when we talk about Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, what are we really talking about?
Well, Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar, it was a truly remarkable place. His reign, it lasted from 605 to 562 BC. And this was, it was a really significant period of change in the ancient world. You had the mighty Assyrian Empire, this empire that had dominated the region, well, for centuries. And it was starting to decline.
And that's where Nebuchadnezzar comes in.
Exactly. He saw this opportunity, and he seized it. He expanded his own empire, and he acquired all these territories stretching from, the Sinai Peninsula all the way to southern Asia Minor.
So he was quite the power player, this Nebuchadnezzar.
Oh, absolutely. He was ambitious, a skilled military leader. But there's more to the story. It's not just about, political maneuvering.
I also love there.
Babylon's rise, it wasn't just about military strength. It was also deeply, deeply rooted in their religion.
Religion. Tell me more about that.
Well, according to Babylonian mythology, right, they considered Babylon to be the center of the cosmos, this sacred link between heaven, the earth, and even the underworld. And this belief, this played a huge role in shaping Nebuchadnezzar's ambitions. It wasn't just about building a political capital. He wanted to create a city that reflected its divine purpose, a symbol of Babylon's connection to the heavens.
I see. So how did he go about doing that?
That's a good question. It was through a really ambitious architectural program. He rebuilt the city walls. He constructed these magnificent gates, like, the iconic Ishtar Gate.
Right.
And he restored temples and palaces. He wanted to make Babylon this city that awed and inspired, a city that reflected its status as a religious and cultural center.
Speaking of the Ishtar Gate, I remember seeing a reconstruction of it in Berlin. And those glazed bricks, those vibrant blues, the mythical beasts, it's truly breathtaking.
Absolutely. It's incredible. And it's important to remember that they didn't just use, those lapis lazuli colored glazed bricks just for looks. It was deeply symbolic. That blue, it represented wealth, divinity, that connection to the heavens that was so central to their belief system. Even the lions on the processional way, they weren't just decorations. They represented Ishtar, the goddess of love and war. She was a key figure in their pantheon. Every detail, every material, it was all infused with meaning.
So it sounds like Nebuchadnezzar, he wasn't just a conqueror, he was a builder, almost an artist, really, with this deep understanding of the religious and cultural significance of what he was doing.
Exactly. And to really understand just how complex Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon was, we need to look beyond these grand monuments. We have to delve into the lives of the people who actually lived there. Luckily for us, we have this fascinating window into their world, and that's through, the discovery of all these cuneiform tablets.
Cuneiform tablets. What can those tell us about daily life in ancient Babylon?
Well, a lot of these tablets are actually records of food and, commodity distributions from the palace.
Okay.
And they give us this glimpse into the diverse social fabric of the city. You see rations given not just to Babylonian elites, but to individuals who are identified as Judeans, Greeks, Ionians, really people from all walks of life.
So Babylon was like a melting pot, a truly cosmopolitan city.
It certainly seems that way. And these tablets, they really challenge the traditional view of ancient cities as being, relatively homogenous. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, it was a place where people from all corners of the empire and even beyond, they came together. They traded, they lived side by side.
That's fascinating. You mentioned Judeans. Now, wasn't there a Judean king who was exiled to Babylon?
Ah, you're thinking of King Jehoiachin. And yes, one of these tablets actually confirms the biblical account of his exile after Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem. It actually lists rations of oil and barley that were given to Jehoiachin and his family, along with other individuals identified as Judeans.
Wow, that's incredible. So we're seeing evidence of a biblical story playing out in these ancient records. It must have been quite a culture shock for those exiled Judeans, finding themselves in this bustling foreign city.
I'm sure it was a dramatic change for them, but these tablets also suggest that, they weren't just left to fend for themselves. I mean, the fact that they were receiving these rations, even if they weren't living in luxury, it shows a level of care and organization from the Babylonian administration.
I guess it makes sense, right? I mean, integrating conquered people into the system rather than just punishing them. That would have been a more effective way to maintain control over such a vast empire.
Exactly. And it's fascinating to think about the interactions that must have happened between these different cultural groups in Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. I mean, you can imagine a Greek merchant bartering for dates with a Babylonian scribe, or a Judean craftsman sharing his skills with a Babylonian apprentice. It must have been an incredibly vibrant and dynamic place.
It really makes you want to step back in time and experience it firsthand. Yeah, we have this picture of Babylon as this city of architectural marvels, religious significance, incredible diversity. But but what about the famous Hanging Gardens? I mean, were they real? Where do they fit into all of it?
Ah, the Hanging Gardens.
Yeah.
One of the seven wonders of the ancient world, yet shrouded in mystery. Interestingly enough, Nebuchadnezzar himself, he never mentions them in his inscriptions. And
Yeah.
and even Herodotus, who described Babylon in great detail, he doesn't mention them either.
So right away we're already in the realm of speculation.
Exactly. The earliest account we have is from a Babylonian priest named Berossus. And he was writing, centuries after Nebuchadnezzar's reign. And he attributes these gardens to Nebuchadnezzar, claiming that they were built to please his Median wife. Apparently she missed her mountainous homeland.
Oh, a grand romantic gesture. I love that image.
I know, it's wonderful. And Berossus describes these gardens as being built on these high terraces. Now, these terraces, they would require a very sophisticated irrigation system to keep all that lush vegetation alive, in the arid Babylonian climate.
That sounds like a logistical nightmare, honestly. I mean, do we have any evidence that such technology even existed back then?
Well, there are some clues. Earlier Assyrian kings, they described using these devices that were similar to Archimedes' screw to raise water for their gardens. So it's possible that similar techniques were used in Babylon, but we just don't have, definitive proof.
So the Hanging Gardens, they remain an enigma, a beautiful legend, maybe a reality, but ultimately a mystery that continues to fascinate us.
Well, that's the beauty of studying history, isn't it? Some of the most intriguing questions, they remain unanswered,
Right.
which leaves room for wonder and continued exploration.
Absolutely. We've uncovered a lot about Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, but there's still so much more to discover.
Before the break, we were talking about how grand Babylon was under Nebuchadnezzar, the culture, the vibrancy. But like all empires, even Babylon's golden age, it couldn't last forever.
Yeah, what happened after Nebuchadnezzar died? Did things start to fall apart?
They did. After his death, there was a period of political instability.
That makes sense. Everyone fighting for power, I guess. Who took over? Did any of Nebuchadnezzar's kids inherit the throne?
Well, actually, one of his sons did, Marduk. But his reign, it was very short. He was assassinated after only 2 years.
2 years. That's hardly any time at all
Yeah.
to really make a lasting impact. What happened after that?
Well, then the throne went to Neriglissar. He was probably Nebuchadnezzar's son-in-law.
Okay.
He was a military man, and he ruled for 4 years, and then his son Labashi Marduk took over. But his reign was even shorter than Marduk's. He was overthrown.
Overthrow. Was it a coup?
It was a conspiracy.
Wow. That's interesting. Who was behind it?
Well, the conspirators, they put a man named Nabonidus on the throne.
Nabonidus. Okay.
And what's really fascinating about him is that he was a high-ranking official in Nebuchadnezzar's court.
Hmm.
He might even be the same Nabonidus that's mentioned in those cuneiform tablets we talked about earlier.
Wait, so this Nabonidus, he was already in the inner circle during Nebuchadnezzar's reign, and then he ends up seizing power. He was playing the long game, huh?
Oh, he certainly was. He was ambitious, a real political operator. Professor Bollier, he describes Nabonidus as a capable leader. He even expanded the empire into northern Arabia.
Yeah.
He was also a bit unconventional.
Unconventional. In what way?
Well, according to the historical records, Nabonidus, he had some conflicts with the priesthood
Hmm.
and other high-ranking officials.
Mm.
But probably the most interesting thing about his reign is that he spent 10 years living in an oasis in northern Arabia.
10 years.
Yeah, he left his son, Belshazzar, in charge of Babylon.
10 years is a long time to be away from the capital.
It's very unusual. It definitely suggests he was a unique personality, made some unconventional choices. And that name, Belshazzar, it might sound familiar to those of you who know the book of Daniel in the Bible.
Oh, yeah. Belshazzar.
Yeah.
That's the handwriting on the wall story.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll talk about those biblical connections later. For now, let's focus on the impact Nabonidus' absence had on the empire. You know, his long stay in Arabia, it created this power vacuum back in Babylon, and it left the empire vulnerable.
So while Nabonidus was off on his Arabian adventures, trouble was brewing back home.
Exactly. And that trouble came in the form of a new power rising in the east. The Persians, led by Cyrus the Great.
Cyrus the Great, he's a big name in history, known for his military skills and his pretty tolerant approach to ruling the places he conquered.
He is. And unfortunately for Babylon, Cyrus, he set his sights on their empire. In 539 BC, the Persians, under Cyrus, they conquered Babylon, and that marked the end of ancient Mesopotamia as an independent political entity.
Wow. So after all of the grandeur and ambition of Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon eventually fell to outsiders. It's a reminder that even the mightiest empires, they don't last forever.
Yeah.
But what happened to the city itself? Was it destroyed? Did life just stop in Babylon?
That's a great question. And luckily, Babylon's story, it didn't end there. You see, although it was conquered, the city itself wasn't destroyed by the Persians.
Really?
Yeah. Cyrus, he actually adopted a pretty tolerant policy towards the Babylonians. He allowed them to keep their religious practices. He even incorporated Babylonian administrative systems into his own empire.
So life in Babylon continued, even under Persian rule.
It did. The city, it remained a significant cultural and economic center for centuries. And even though it never regained its political independence, Babylon, it continued to thrive under various rulers. Even Alexander the Great, he actually planned to make Babylon the capital of his vast empire, but he died before he could do that.
That's fascinating. So even though, Nebuchadnezzar's dynasty ended and the Babylonian Empire fell, the city itself, it still played a role in the ancient world.
Absolutely. Babylon's story, it's complex.
Mm.
There's ambition, there's religious fervor, there's architectural grandeur, and ultimately there's resilience.
It's incredible to think about all the layers of history that are embedded in a place like Babylon. And speaking of layers, we talked about the biblical connections earlier. How does the fall of Babylon fit into the biblical narrative? And what about those cuneiform tablets? Do they tell us anything more about those exiled Judeans and their lives? So we talked about the fall of Babylon and how the city kept going even under the Persians. But let's go back to those cuneiform tablets for a minute. The ones that seem to back up what's in the Bible.
Right. Right. Some of them, as we said, directly support the biblical account. Like the exile of King Jehoiachin and his family. They were sent to Babylon, and these tablets, they actually confirm that.
It really is amazing how archaeology and these historical records, they can sometimes line up with these religious texts. It's pretty tangible.
Absolutely. It shows us how important it is to look at history from different angles.
Yeah.
These tablets don't just verify events mentioned in the Bible. They also give us valuable insights into the lives of those exiled Judeans.
What kind of insights?
Well, for example, the tablets that list the rations for Jehoiachin and the other Judeans, they suggest that they weren't treated like common prisoners.
Right.
They got provisions, oil, barley, other necessities. It shows that the Babylonian administration had some some level of care and organization.
So they weren't living in luxury, but they were being taken care of. Did the tablets tell us anything about what happened to them after they got to Babylon?
Well, Professor Bellier, he thinks that the Babylonians probably encouraged these exiled populations to kind of integrate into their society. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar, he was ruling this vast and diverse empire, assimilating the conquered elites, even taking care of their needs. It would have been a strategic way to maintain stability, maintain control.
Yeah, makes sense. Keep your friends close, right? And your former enemies even closer.
Exactly. And by integrating these groups, Nebuchadnezzar, he could also benefit from their skills, their knowledge. You can picture Judean artisans sharing their expertise with Babylonian craftsmen or merchants from different regions, exchanging ideas and goods. This cultural exchange, it would make Babylonian society even more vibrant and dynamic.
It's a it's a much more nuanced picture than just, winners and losers.
Yeah.
These tablets, they really humanize history. They remind us that these were real people, with their own stories, their own experiences.
That's right. And speaking of stories, the biblical account of how Babylon fell, the one described in the book of Daniel, it paints a pretty dramatic picture.
Yeah.
It talks about Belshazzar, the son of Nabonidus, having this feast with his nobles, and suddenly this mysterious hand appears and writes on the palace wall. It predicts that the city is going to fall.
Oh, the handwriting on the wall.
Yeah.
It's a powerful image, even today.
It is, it is. And while we can't, confirm that this actually happened, it does reflect the anxiety and uncertainty of that time. Remember, Nabonidus had been away in Arabia for so long, it created this sense of vulnerability in Babylon. And the Persians, they were becoming a bigger threat. So this story, it might reflect how uneasy many Babylonians felt about their future.
So even if the handwriting on the wall is more of a symbolic story than a literal one, it still tells us something about the historical context, the time when Babylon was declining.
Precisely. And in the end, the Persians, led by Cyrus, they did conquer Babylon. It was the end of Babylon as an independent empire. But as we talked about, the city itself, it kept going under Persian rule. It became part of this new world order, the one that would eventually lead to the Hellenistic period and the huge empire of Alexander the Great.
Wow, it's incredible to think about the long and complicated history of a place like Babylon. We've covered a lot in this deep dive. Nebuchadnezzar's building projects, the diversity of the city, the mystery of those hanging gardens, and what we learned from those cuneiform tablets about daily life back then. It's been quite a journey.
It has. We haven't just looked at the grandeur of an ancient empire, but also the stories of the people who lived there, who worked there, who worshipped there.
Yeah. And it's a reminder that history isn't just about dates and battles, right? It's about human stories, the choices we make, the empires we build, and the legacies we leave behind.
Well said. And maybe that's the most important thing we take away from our deep dive into Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. It's a city that still captures our imagination. It reminds us how connected human history is and how powerful stories are, how they can connect us across time and cultures.
I think that's a great place to end it. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. And remember, there are so many other stories out there, so many mysteries waiting to be discovered. So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep uncovering the fascinating world of history. We'll see you on our next deep dive.